Okay, one, two, three. Hello! Welcome to Free Will, Science, and Religion. I'm Chandler Klebs, and I'm here with George Ortega, and we're going to talk about people's emotional biases, their emotional need to believe certain things, and how what people believe has a lot more to do with their emotions, how it makes them feel to believe a certain thing, rather than an unbiased or objective examination of the facts. And I think this applies to many things. It applies to all sorts of religious belief. It applies to people's resistance to certain new scientific discoveries. But the free will belief, no subject can it possibly apply more to, because a lot of people are raised with the idea that your choices are what make you who you are. That And so they get into this thinking that, well, if I'm not in control of my life, and that my choices, I'm not, that I can't take credit for that, then they're like, well, what's the point of life? Because a lot of people, life is all about choice. You take that away, and then they feel like life's not worth living. And so, we're going to talk about, what do people need to hear? How can we explain how the message of no free will, is actually helpful? It helps you emotionally, besides being, observably and true. Um, because I think, yeah, this is a big problem for a lot of people. Um, and one thing is, there's some people who say, well, since those people get their meaning out of that we should just let them believe in free will. Some people might say that, but there's one little problem. Those people suffer from the free will belief more than they possibly know, not only because they blame themselves, and feel all this shame and guilt over mistakes they've made, but because they're blaming other people, it hurts their relationships with those other people. And so we have to, I guess, explain to our audience how this helps people on a very personal level, in how you treat everyone, and can make your life happier overall.
All right, so yeah, let's start off with the idea of self-identity. People have been conditioned, raised to believe that they, of their own free will, choose what they choose, and they like that sense of control. So, like, one message I think we can try to deliver to them that might help them overcome this lack of control, this truth-based lack of control, is to kind of like, for theists, it's a bit easier in a certain sense, but it gets into complications we actually spoke about in the last episode. But for theists, we could say to these people, well, like, you don't manifest your will, you manifest God's will. In other words, like, for example, if somebody was called up someday, like, um, and asked by President Obama to, like, listen, I want you to do this, and then, I want you to do that and that person would probably feel like they had more meaning during that day than other days when they're like basically just doing whatever they want. So now, like, imagine like they're believing that they're actually doing what God wants. Again, like, the problem with that, of course, is then like that would lead to people like saying to themselves, well, wait a minute, that means I have to blame God for my evil. And again, we need to address that. But I think in general, in the sense of like basic control and an identity, if we explain to theists that they're doing God's will, I think that might be palatable to them.
Yeah, for some of them that might work, because I guess some of them might say, well, yeah, I'm doing God's will, and they may have a belief that God is good, and that everything will work out eventually somehow, that there's a greater good or purpose behind it. And for some people that seems to work. It makes them feel better. But I mean, I don't really find that too satisfying, obviously. But then again, I don't believe in God either. So, but we've got to find something that helps people, where they have something else, you might say, to ground their life's purpose in. Because a lot of people, they need to feel like there's a certain meaning or purpose to their life. And so I guess we're getting into the deep psychology of the meaning of life and what makes life valuable. I think that's a necessary step to get in. Not, not completely disconnected thing where life is about nothing. So yeah, we need a solution to this problem.
All right, so essentially, we basically, you're right. So, like, for people that are not theists, who don't believe in God, who believe in science, then I think, yes, I think we have a respect for nature. I think we have a respect for the universe. That the universe, like, basically has these laws of motion, these physical laws, and there's an awesomeness to the universe. So, we're, in this sense, then we'd be replacing God with the universe. We're no longer doing our will as insignificant little people on a little planet, in one of billions of galaxies. In a more general, accurate sense, we're doing the will of the universe. That might resonate well with people.
Yeah, I think in a sense that totally could. Now, like, for me, I think of myself as just part of this big puzzle of the universe, and that I'm one form of life, just like every other animal and even the plants, that grows and changes and adapts, evolves. And I think that's cool. I mean, I find this whole worldview very appealing, and it's cool. So with me, I feel like I found meaning in the universe and the experience of life, and there's plenty to enjoy, even while I realize that I'm not the first causer of things. But basically, this is a movie or a puppet show, and we call it life. It's the most amazing thing ever. So what I hope that everyone else, comes to see it that way or finds something else that makes them happy with their life, without having to lie to themselves that there's some kind of first causer who pulls decisions out of nothing. There's got to be a way. So I think we have some ways. Some people um, find their meaning in their belief in God. They're doing the will of God. Some people, well, they just feel at one with the universe, and they're doing the will of the universe, and so for them that appeals. I think that you and I are more that sort of people. Um, but any other ideas that might help?
Well, another thing, so basically we've addressed identity or self-identity. I think let's go to what you mentioned before. In other words, like meaning. People feel that without free will, the life has, no meaning. And I mean, like that doesn't make sense for two very important points. One is that fine, we don't have free will, but life is still amazing and awesome and very mysterious because we never know what's going to happen. We might know that what happens, in the future is caused, but not knowing what's going to happen tomorrow and the next month and the next year, I think keeps us very, very interested in, in our life. And the other part relates to, like, for example, many of us have seen the same movie, like It's a Wonderful Life. Some people have seen that a dozen times, and they know what's going to happen, and they know that, like they're not in control of anything that happens in that movie, yet they enjoy that movie thoroughly. So they can apply that same perspective to our lives and the lives of the people around them.
Yes, definitely. And movies are a fine example because anybody who loves watching movies or plays or anything like that, they think, well, they didn't get any choice in what happens in that movie. It was made by a team of people working on that, and it wasn't even up to those people either. And it gets very interesting, this movie of life, and I think it's totally enjoyable. And there's great funniness to be found, great joy to be seen in this whole um, completely deterministic, yet nonetheless very unpredictable life we live
Excellent. So there's another misconception people have about not having free will. A lot of people say, well, if I don't have a free will, that means I can't change, I can't grow, I can't become more or better or something. And that's actually, we have to explain to people, no, not having a free will means simply that it's not up to us fundamentally whether we change or not, or how much we change, or how we change, but we still can change, so the idea is, yes, we can still, seek goals, self-development goals, self-achievement goals, and fine, fundamentally, it's not up to us what these goals are and how well we succeed, but we still enjoy the process of working on the goal to become a better musician, to become a better student, a better worker, whatever. This stuff is still real and we still enjoy that.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I don't understand the claim that we can't change, because everyone knows that we all change all the time, whether for better or worse. We change, you know. Um, and what's interesting is particularly just thinking how life has changed over billions of years. How with natural selection, how certain things were better. It was an advantage to run away from predators that are trying to eat you. And yeah, I think they learned. I think the all the animals have learned that when something's trying to kill you, run away. There's a learned behavior, a change. But I mean, it's still not fundamentally up to that animal, that there was a predator chasing it, and that it had a need to not feel the pain of being eaten by a lion. It's not up to them, but in order to maintain their life and happiness, they run away. That's a fine example of change. Change that's beneficial.
Okay, excellent. Now let's go to fears people have, because a lot of people say, well, if we abandon this belief in free will, people are going to think that, well, if I don't have free will, I can do whatever I want, and you can't blame me, you can't punish me, you can't hold me fundamentally morally responsible. So, Chandler, how do we address those fears in people?
Well, first of all, the thing is that on this, this whole claim, oh well, I can do whatever I want. Well, in a sense, that's almost true. There are certain things that people want to do that they will find they can't do. But even when they are able to successfully do what they want to do, it's true that even though nobody can hold them fundamentally responsible, they will still try to stop them. That doesn't change. It's not that when someone's attacking you that you just let them beat you up. It's not like that happens. People, because they want to be happy and avoid pain, they will put a stop to harmful actions that they know will hurt and kill them or others that they care about.
Exactly. Okay, and the important point is, like, under free will, basically, when people do wrong, we want to correct their behavior, but we go a step further. We also want them punished. We want them to suffer. And actually, there's an experiment where half of the subjects were primed to believe in free will, and the other half were primed to disbelieve in it, and the free will believers, then they were all asked the question, well, this person committed a certain crime, what should be their punishment? And like the free will believers would say something like, well, they believe to be they deserve to be in prison for 20 years. The disbelief in free will half subjects actually have that sentence. Ordinarily, they were far more compassionate and understanding. In other words, they were basing their ideas about punishment on, well, what's necessary to rehabilitate or reform these people? What's necessary to have a deterrence toward other people not doing the same thing. So it was reason based instead of revenge and hate and retribution based.
Yeah. And what's interesting is people's belief that people deserve punishment actually makes society worse in every possible way, because the purpose of, someone going to jail is not because they deserve it. We know that they don't. The purpose is so that at least for a time, they cannot commit that same crime again, and hopefully they won't be released if they're still in a state where we expect them to do the exact same thing. And so I think the entire criminal justice system totally has to be reformed. I mean, and it's very problematic.
Absolutely, and like relative to you're right. I mean, society really wants to protect society from certain individuals and their behavior, and like to the extent we believe in free will, we impose institutions and policies that work counter to that. For example, sometimes in certain prisons, they will give these prisoners an education. They'll allow them to like graduate high school. They'll teach them work skills and all, so that when they come back into society, they don't have to resort to crime to have an income and all. But people who believe in free will often vote against those policies. They say to themselves, and they vote for politicians who say, "Well, we're not going to reward these criminals with a high school or a college education because they have a free will. They don't deserve this kind of treatment." In other words, like if certain poor people can't afford to, college education, it's wrong to educate prisoners in that way. So basically, the free will belief is working counter to what's in the best interests of not just the criminals, but of society in general.
You're right, George, because if it weren't for that free will belief, then people would not be thinking about, well, these criminals deserve to just suffer in solitary confinement and isolation and suffer and be punished, rather than having prison be a rehabilitation place, a place where they can get education, learn some skills, work some kind of a job, and eventually, if it goes well, be released, and we can know that they're safe. I mean, seriously, yes, people vote against such ideas because they don't believe that that criminal deserves an education, deserves to get another chance. So that's a big problem.
Okay, so now we've been focusing on society, and it's important because people have these sociological concerns. They want to be sure that as people, you know, disbelief in free will, basically our civilization will be preserved. But now let's focus on our individual personal lives. In other words, like when our friends do something wrong under the free will belief, yeah, we might want to understand them or be compassionate toward them or forgive them out of our sense of morality. But, there's a part of us that says, well, they did something wrong to me. So emotionally, we react to them with retribution. All of a sudden, like, if our friend or someone we know did something wrong, we're kind of like hostily emotionally attacking them based on the free will belief. So explain how, like, as we shift as individuals from this free will belief to the understanding that absolutely nobody has any fundamental control over what we do, our personal relationships will be enhanced in these situations where we'd otherwise blame each other.
Yes. See, it hurts each person individually too, because what happens is they're holding grudges and they're unable to forgive these people for ways that they've hurt them, because they believe that these people chose to do it. It's very interesting, they chose to do it of their free will or whatever, and so they stay angry at them, and they're like, well, why should I forgive them? They deserve for me to punish them. And that feeling that somebody deserves punishment and that they've wronged you, and so an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. They hurt me, so I'm going to hurt them. That attitude leads to all sorts of crimes. And what is different under this no free will perspective is it's not just so much that it's the compassionate and rational thing to forgive, but there's actually nothing to forgive in the first place. Because what we understand is that these people, they did not choose to be what they are. And so it's sort of like, but some people might find it helpful to use that word forgiveness. It doesn't mean that if somebody is still harmful and you can't restore a relationship with them, that you have to keep staying around them. You may want to separate yourself from these people, but you will no longer be hurt. Just being angry at them and how badly that they mistreated you, even for stuff that happened years ago. So it helps people individually. Even if it doesn't change anything else, they don't have that extra edge of anger and rage that just poisons them.
Chandler, you made some excellent points. Let's start out with like essentially, you know, first of all, there's nothing to forgive. In other words, like if somebody implanted an electrode in my brain or something, some scientist, and made me do something wrong, somebody who knew about it and saw it and understood it, they couldn't, they would not blame me, so that basically if I did something wrong, they wouldn't have to give me, because like again, like it would be the cause of the whoever did it, or the electrode and all. So but that's the first part. The second part is that like under the free will paradigm, yes, we are blameworthy and we forgive, but we forgive out of goodness. In other words, like it's forgiveness is the moral thing to do, whereas like to the extent that we understand we don't have a free will and others don't have a free will, all of a sudden not blaming them becomes the rational thing to do. In other words, we don't have to rely on morality. We rely on something that's more fundamental to us, reason. It becomes completely illogical to blame them.
Yes, it gets very interesting because you find there's no one that you can actually blame. It's interesting because though, just like with the electrode in the brain, or somebody spiking somebody's drink and they do something crazy, we understand that bad ideas, bad experiences, bad teachings, whether that was something that happened a year ago or whether it was something that happened long ago in their childhood that made them think in a certain way and act in a certain way, we understand that they're no more in control in that situation than when someone is drugged or has some device implanted in their head that controls them. And for a lot of people, it's hard to understand that. It's hard for them to really get that people, even those who have hurt you, they too are victims themselves. And rather than blaming them, what it does to me is just like, well, how can I help this person? How can I help them for, about what happened to them that turned them into this and doing this. So I think what happens, part of what's great about it is it gets you away from feeling how badly you were mistreated and what a sad thing you are, and then you start caring about this other person too. And for a lot of people, that's hard. It's very hard.
Absolutely. And Chandler, so like we've just been addressing how it improves how we react to other people for their benefit as well as ours. Now, I have two basic areas of focus right now in my work. One is like this, exposing this illusion of free will. The second is human happiness. I was just leading a meetup on happiness earlier today. I lead a lot of groups on happiness every month, about 10 of them. And so, like, the idea is like what they've discovered in happiness research is that self esteem is a very, very important personality trait to have in order to be happy. But see, with the free will belief, what happens is like other people do things wrong, we blame them and we think less of them. But when we do wrong, then we turn that blame toward ourselves, and we actually, we punish ourselves, and our self-esteem diminishes. So again, like, to the extent that we overcome the belief in free will, when we find that the universe or God or however we want to describe it has made us do something wrong, fine, we'll say to ourselves, yeah, it's unfortunate that that happened, and hopefully we'll be compelled by the universe to vow to try to correct ourselves to be better in the future. But we won't blame ourselves. We won't hold ourselves fundamentally responsible for our own wrongdoing, and as a result, our self-esteem and self-identity will be preserved. We'll think good of ourselves.
Yes, it it helps such a amazing amount because in people's quest about forgiving people, they don't want to forget forgiving themselves and not blaming themselves for their past mistakes too. I think that's better than anything else because um, people, who believe in free will. Now with other people, they can at least separate themselves from that person so they don't have to think about them sometimes. But you can't escape yourself until you're dead. So how people, their self-esteem, how they view themselves is perhaps even more important because there's no escape from that. And so by removing the blame and guilt that people feel over their mistakes and bad things that they've done, that's the best of all the benefits of overcoming the illusion of free will.
Okay, yeah, and we've only got about, I guess, about 3 minutes left. So let's go through another one. In other words, like, a lot of times we want to feel close to the people in our lives. But let's say, like, there's two siblings or two close friends, and one friend goes on to, let's say, go to medical school, becomes a doctor, makes a lot of money. The other person, just like has a job with much less prestige and all. So this person who became a doctor, who became very successful, will tend to feel arrogant. Will tend to feel that they're better than the person who did less. Who's maybe a teacher or something, and then the teacher will in turn feel maybe like kind of resentful or envious or just wrongly kind of like look up to this doctor in a way that like the doctor, the very educated, successful person is for some reason more worthy, is more valuable. I mean, certainly some professions are more valuable than others to society and all, but that person has more inherent worth than somebody as a teacher. So basically, these are two free will based conclusions. So how do you propose that like overcoming the illusion of free will helps in these cases?
Well, what's so awesome about it, George, is that it helps you feel equal with everybody. It helps you feel that you're not some separate other from other people. And so now obviously it's better for people who, feel like, oh no, all these other people are better than me and I'm just this lowly wretch, or something like that. So for people like that, the feeling that they're just the same as everybody else, well, that sort of raises them to a level of equality with people. I think the people who it's difficult for, though, are the successful, the wealthy, those people who want to take credit for what they do. What happens is their arrogance, which it requires the belief in free will, they don't want to realize that basically they were just lucky in their success, that they happened to that better education, maybe they were born smarter, they and even that their achievements aren't up to them. And so it's a big blow to their pride, and that's why it's hard for those people to overcome it. But for the rest of us who feel like other people are better than us, it's wonderful. So we just have to figure out how to deal with the issue of the people who it's hard for them to accept that they can't take credit for their success.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess we'll have to continue it in more episodes as always because it just never ends. We know about the infinite regress, but I call this the infinite progress. Okay, I guess we're out of time. So you've been listening to Free Will, Science, and Religion with Chandler Klebs and George Ortega, and I guess you'll hear from us again in more episodes. Bye for now.
All right, Chandler, that was